So, hi guys. This is my first reaction, and today we're reacting to the real reason everybody hates Gen Alpha by was that Bonfang Shank. Okay, let's just.
Have you ever heard of Generation Alpha?
This new generation might just be brain dead.
We are in a crisis.
This next generation might just be doomed.
We truly are
Yeah.
in the end times of humanity.
I don't think we understand how bad it's actually going to get.
The next generation is cooked.
Yeah,
Chances are, you've probably seen a recent influx of videos and articles on Gen Alpha decrying the latest
I've seen
generation
lots
as
of them.
doomed, hopeless, or some other phrase describing how they're uniquely worse than previous generations.
yeah.
But is this really true? Is Gen Alpha actually the worst generation? Let's examine why the subject of Gen Alpha is trending in the
This video. The thing is, the worst one is actually Generation Beta. The least active Gen Beta. Gen Beta is the least active generation and most consumed by the iPad. Dude, the iPad is the worst thing ever invented. Now, while I am using one, I know what is going on and I'm avoiding it. I'm trying to avoid it.
first place. Part of it has to do with the simple fact that Gen Z is currently being replaced by Gen A as the latest rising generation, slowly developing their own identity and culture, explained in my previous video. Another big reason why it's trendy to panic over Gen Alpha is because of some serious concerns that must be acknowledged. Most notably, the alarming number of screens children today have access to, the pandemic and its effects on Gen Alpha's performance in school, and the unprecedented era of children growing up in a world with VR and AI. Despite all these very real issues, no one is talking about the biggest reason for this trend
What is
of
it?
Gen
What is it?
Alpha doomerism. Society's timeless fear
Oh,
and
yeah.
panic over the youth. Today, it's Generation Alpha and their inability to read, obsession over skibbity toilet,
Yeah.
and lack of basic manners. But people seem to forget that just yesterday, it was Generation
What?
Z and our lack of basic manners, obsession over MLG brain rot, and non-existent attention span. And millennials,
Yeah.
don't think we forgot about you either. You were the subject of abuse by boomers for years, with the infamous 2013 Time article summarizing Gen Y as lazy, entitled narcissists, as well as getting blamed for the death of everything from golf to credit cards.
What?
Now you might think it stops with the
Gen X
millennials,
boomers
and that
going
prior
for-
to their existence, all the generations lived in peaceful harmony. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Generation X was known as the lost generation, being scolded for their lack of work ethic, disinterest in marriage, and short attention span. Now, to the 1% of my audience who are boomers watching this, you might be laughing at the rest of us right now. But just because your elders are no longer on this earth to expose you, doesn't mean that I won't. This may come as a surprise because boomers have often hidden this fact from anyone younger than them. But the generations who fought in World War I, survived the Spanish flu, lived through the Great Depression, and fought in World War II, accuse baby boomers of being the spoiled, immoral, narcissistic generation that plagues society. Now, I don't know if it was generational trauma or just projection, but almost every modern label we associate with the younger generations, whether that be for Gen Alpha,
Okay.
Gen Z, Millennials, or Gen X, were all originally used for boomers. But it doesn't even stop with them. Pretty much every generation prior to boomers have had older people bemoaning them for many of the same critiques we hear for the youth today. It's a phenomenon that occurs when humans reach a certain age that I'd like to call the kids these days effect. Kids these days are obsessed with luxury, have bad manners, contempt for authority, show disrespect for their elders, and prefer chatting over going outside. Children don't respect their parents and tyrannize their teachers at school. You might assume this was written by a disgruntled elder ranting about how Gen Alpha is ruining society as we know it. But this wasn't written with Gen Alpha in mind. No, it wasn't for Gen Z either. In fact, it wasn't for millennials, Gen X,
What?
baby boomers, or any generation you can think of. This was from Aristotle, with me simply adjusting the passage to the way we speak today, but nonetheless from someone who lived over 2,000 years ago, complaining about the newer generation born after his. So why does this happen? Why do older generations insist on using the same stereotypes for youth that were used against themselves when they were young? There seems to be two major reasons for this way of thinking. The first being that much like how nostalgia is rose-tinted, people seem to conveniently forget the many critiques and issues their generation faced when they were younger, and inadvertently push these same critiques onto the next generation. The second reason is people tend to feel that their generation was special in some way. When researching the subject, I would often look into videos of every generation in their era of youth, and see endless comments by said generations lamenting about how much the world has changed since they were young. But more interestingly, almost without fail, they would make a statement that was something along the lines of, "We had it so good back then." The younger generations don't know what it's like to live without. For generations prior to boomers, it was
Blank
TV.
iPads.
For baby boomers who grew up with TVs, it was computers. For Gen X who first saw computers, it was social media.
Okay, well, for
For
iPad, there's
millennials
iPads.
with MySpace and AOL, it was smartphones. For Gen Z with their iPhones, it's now AI. And undoubtedly, for Gen Alpha in the future with their ChatGPT 15 and
What?
Vision Pro 6, it will probably be something like brain chips. This phenomenon seen across every generation is only logical. In a world that is so rapidly changing and full of new technologies that have positive utility, but also plenty of negative effects as well, it's easy for older people to
And
point to a
TVs,
specific thing
computers,
that
it's social
ruined
media,
today's children.
it's social
Or at the
media.
very least, made childhoods today so much less enjoyable than previous ones. Everyone has a bias in seeing themselves as part of the last true generation, before it all went bad. But what's really true is, there is no last generation. As long as humans continue to create new technologies and new humans, there will always be a revolutionary technology or product that changes how children grow up compared to kids in the past. For millennials and Gen Z, the internet was our revolutionary technology, allowing us to have access to a free and open space to connect with others, learn more about the world, and just have fun. However, without a VPN, our personal information is exposed to internet service providers, tech companies, advertisers, and even data brokers. And we risk having our private data collected by the government or stolen by hackers without our consent. So I'm proud to say that I was already a paying user with ExpressVPN way before this